Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Seuninscience. I'm Seun and I'm in science. Today we are continuing my conversations with fellow scientists, and today I have Dr. Elisa Laurenti, who is one of the PIs here at the Stem Cell Institute. So could you introduce yourself a bit more and just tell us a bit?
Yes, thanks Sean. It's a pleasure to be talking to you about my experiences. So I am a PI in stem cell biology, and I work on human hematopoietic stem cells. I've been a PI for 5 years, which has really flown by. It's been really fast. And I've been in this field since 2004, which makes me feel really old. That's the way it is. And before that, in biology since 1997, when I started my master's. So it's been a while. But I've always really enjoyed it, and yeah, so I'm happy to discuss.
So, like, when you were doing your master's, for example, did you ever envision yourself being a PI? Like, was that always a goal for you, or was it just more of like, I'll see where life takes me? You know?
I think when I started I did a master that was really general biology, so even though I was already interested in understanding, how the body works more from a molecular side, genetic side, I really enjoyed genetics when I was in high school, and I thought, well, I just want to know more about generally biology, and I decided to do a very broad biology degree that also had stuff on plants, and I hated botany because I knew that I didn't want to do botany, but then I also realized that I really wanted to more about the molecular mechanisms. And actually our master was very, very theoretical, which I really did enjoy on one hand, but on the other hand I also wanted to really know how it would be hands-on to be a scientist, and I've always been drawn to try to answer questions and try to figure out how things work. And so I think at the time I really wanted to make the transition to see how it would be in a lab and how it would be to actually be answering the questions rather than just studying them. So I always enjoyed studying them, I still do, but I really wanted to make that transition. Now, whether from then I wanted to be a PI or not, I don't think I really knew, but what I knew is that I wanted to experience life in the lab and see what it was like.
And during your master's, did you already have hands-on experience in the lab?
Not
really.
Said it
was more theoretical.
Yeah, so
right?
This was, as I said, back in '97 in Italy, and I guess biology was not what it is now. It was even before the genome, so this tells you a bit how different it was. And I think biology has really exploded, and obviously there were lots of people doing lots of things in lab, but the teaching was still very much, at least it was a 5-year master, so the first 3 years were really theoretical. Yeah, it was a 5-year master. So 3 years were just theory, and then the last 2 years were more about there were 2 years that I chose were genetics and molecular biology, and there we had some labs, but it was really, really little. And I had the opportunity at the end to do a 9 months internship, and I was working with flies, and that was really exciting, and that's why I really decided that was really what I wanted to do. But let's say for the vast duration of the master, it was just theoretical, and it was just at the end that we had the opportunity to go into labs and really experience doing experiments.
So wait, so is this master's on top of doing a first degree?
So no, that's the first degree. No, so it was included all in one. So at the time it was before the Bologna thing that said that masters was 3+1 or 3+2. There was 3 bachelor plus a master, and there it was all integrated. So you were going straight for a master from the start. There was no bachelor option, at least not in Italy.
Okay.
At the time. So
alright, that's
sorry, I should have clarified.
Because I'm like,
no, not a 5-year master. No.
That is dedication.
No. So I started it straight out from high school. So yeah.
And then what were your next steps? Like, what did you do after your masters?
So there I went on to do a PhD, and I went to Switzerland from Italy, motivated by several things. The first being, I have to admit, a personal one, and my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, was in Switzerland, and he was still finishing his master, and we thought this in Switzerland has a very nice set of PhD programs. At the time it had lots, and there was a lot of very interesting things going on, so I applied to several of them, and I got a position in Lausanne. And that's where I did my PhD, and that was great because he could also stay there, so we could, start our lives together, which is important too, right? So I think it's one of the really difficult things in science is that so if it's two of you and later on more of you, then it becomes more and more complicated to fit the science with the personal life. But I think we've always been quite lucky in that respect.
So are you both in science?
Yes.
Do you think that's helped, or?
He's not in the same field as I am.
Okay.
So on one hand, definitely, because I am super lucky, and I think science is a huge part of my life, and I think it's a huge part of all scientists' life. And it's not necessarily easy for someone who's never experienced this to understand how important it is. And I think he also experiences it, so he really knows how it is. But at the same time, it's not in my field, and that means that we can still have a break from. He knows a lot about my field, but he knows as much as me. And I know a lot about his field, not nowhere near what he knows. But it's just that at least we're not working together, and we can understand the challenges and we can support each other, but we're not so close that there is never a break. And I think that's also very important.
It's a good balance.
But I think it really depends on people. I also have lots of friends who have significant others that are working very, very closely with them, and for some people it just works really well, so it really depends. But for me, I think I really like the idea that I can discuss anything I want with him, but at the same time we also have this separation.
Great. So after how long was your PhD, and what field were you in? And
so it was 4 years and a half, and there I started working on hematopoietic stem cells, which is still what I do today. And at the time I was working with mouse genetics, so we were using animal models of hematopoietic stem cells.
During your PhD or after your PhD, was there like a point in time where you were like, okay, this is where I want to take my life, this is the trajectory I want to go in?
So I really enjoyed doing my PhD, and at the beginning, I really enjoyed being in the lab and doing the experiments and all of that, but I think when it really changed for me, it was really when I started to go to conferences and being able to present my work. And I really enjoyed this part of telling people what you've done and sharing it with them, and really getting the feedback, whether it's not always positive, obviously, but I think it's that sharing and thinking about how other people think about your science. It's that realization that what you're doing in the lab is actually worth a lot in a community, and there's a much larger community in which it fits into, and that there can be really interesting interactions there. And I think there's something really rewarding in being able to talk to people and tell you, this is what I've done, this is what we found, and I know there's limitations and there's so much more that we can do, but it's sharing this enthusiasm and getting feedback on it, and seeing that people are appreciative, and that it fits into what other people have found, and that it's a whole, and it's not just you at your bench, it's a much bigger thing. And I think that's really what made me think, okay, I want to keep doing this, and I want to certainly do a postdoc, and then we'll see whether that takes me. But I think there was the time where I thought, well, I would like to do what my PI does, which is go around and not be, it's being able to run many projects that you really like and that you really want to know the answers to, but also being able to share them with the community and be part of a larger body of people trying to answer questions. I think that's what really drove me.
So you're a PI now, and you said you've been a PI for 5 years. How has that been? Like, obviously a postdoc to a PI is such a big jump, but what has been your experiences in both fields, and like, how has that sort of changed you, change your character or build your character? What has been the difference and nuances between those two roles?
I think I already changed quite a lot from the PhD to the postdoc, because I went to a lab where I had a fantastic mentor, and I couldn't have had a better choice. I'd already had a great mentor as a PhD, but I guess the way the lab was set up where I did my postdoc was really more collaborative, and we were all working together, which seems a bit odd, but in big, large projects where you couldn't achieve it on your own. And there's certainly a personal aspect to that, and you build relationships, and you also realize that you work much better with some people than others, and that really affects how the projects go and all of that. But I really, really adored my time there. think we were so productive mostly because we were working with the structure, even though we had some challenges sometimes. But we achieved so much more because we were doing it as a team. I think that was such a good preparation for being a PI. Because in the end, when you're a PI, there is a lot of responsibility. You've got people, and you need to be able to get the team to work fine. But at the same time, they are the ones doing the work. They are the ones driving the science. I steer them with ideas and things, and obviously it's a lot of work on my side as well, but it's different kind of work. So I'm not at the bench anymore, I'm not doing my own experiments anymore. I'm still very excited to see the data. When they come with data, it's the most rewarding moment. You get to see the data, whether it's positive or negative, it's okay, that's part of science, but you get to see it and really enjoy that part. But at the same time, it's more about managing the science rather than doing it, even though I still do some analysis. But that's more because I really like it, and I think that is a big transition that luckily I did gradually. I still did experiments when I started, and I was in the lab for I think a little bit less than 3 years, and I still do some analysis, and I still try to be part of the team. But as your team grows, it's also a different dynamic, right? And I think you really go from being one of the team to being the boss, and that's not necessarily always a smooth transition. Also personally, because it's a bit weird. I always would just like to be part of the science team, right? No, just because I would like to place everyone equally, right? So it's not.
When I think of like myself, when it comes to like think about my career, like I don't have a clear path that I want to follow just yet. Like I don't know that I want to become a PI or stay strictly in academia. I see myself doing something that is highly integrated, so either like having my foot in academia and industry, and also bringing a bit of science communications here and there. What are your thoughts on that? Like, so when it comes to people establishing a career in science, do you think it's better for them to focus on one aspect, or do you think a more integrative, collaborative between different sectors is?
Yeah, I think that obviously different people have different ways of working, and there are different things that fit them best. I don't think there's a one fit all solution to this, but I certainly see that so as I said, I only have experience in academia, but I think things are way more integrated than they used to be, and even in academia, I need to have skills at all sorts of levels. So, and certainly there is no security anywhere, I think, that tells you I am going to do this and this is going to be A, B, and C, and D, and I'll get there. I think that's not the way it works. So I think you just have to go with what really the passion that you've got, and see where it leads you. And I guess there's lots of opportunities in and out of academia, and there's more and more people that jump from one to the other, and I think that's very successful for them. And so I think it's about capturing the opportunities, and it's about doing something that you like and capturing the opportunities that allow you to do that. I don't think there's a straight path. So
cool. Alright, so I want us to kind of now delve into a bit more of your experience as a female in science, right? Like, when you were a PhD student, were you in a lab that was, like, in terms of like, the gender mix, and how did you feel? Did you feel a minority, or like how has that changed from a PhD student to a postdoc to being a PI, and what has been your experience as a female in science in general in those positions?
So I have to say I've never really felt like a minority in terms of my gender. Right. I've always worked in, I guess already at university we were 80% females in my course. Nice. So definitely we were the majority. Well, maybe it's even too much, I think diversity is good everywhere, so probably the guys were feeling a bit underrepresented. And then doing my PhD, I think we were fluctuating, but we were always between 40 to 60% fluctuating, and doing my postdoc, same thing. And in the lab now we have a bit more women and less guys. But this is something I've noted, is I think as a female PI I get more women applying to me, which is good and bad, I don't know. But it's also part of, I like to also have equally represent the lab, and it can't be, obviously the lab is not that big, so it can't be exactly 50%. I think it's just, but I think the institute is in the bigger context that we're well balanced, so that's nice. So yeah, the first question is, I have never really felt as a minority in terms of being a woman. It's true that the more you go up, the less women there are, at least in terms of academic ranking. I think that's true in every stat, it's everywhere out there, and it's true that you notice that in certain, certain conferences or certain departments or committees, sometimes there are less women than men. I think that's going to change. I've seen it change quite a lot. I think when I was doing my PhD, there were very few women in my field. There are way more women in my field now. There's lots of conferences that are organized by women with lots of women, or organized by men with lots of women, and I think it's not just because we've got quotas, but it's just because really people are getting into the field, and when there are more women in the field, and naturally they come up with the ladder. Now, that's not to say that there aren't, unfortunately, places where there is discrimination, or it's always harder for some women, but I have to say I've been lucky not to experience it that much. Not to, you always get the odd comments, but that's not what I think. You should be prepared for those, and that's not what should stop you from moving forward. It's more, I think I've always been in environments that were promoting everyone to do good science to the best of their capacity, because obviously there's always individuals, and
So I'm just thinking on what you said earlier of you feel that there's more females that apply to your position. So I think that in a way it depends what way you think of it. For me, I think of that as a positive thing, because obviously when there's change happening, it might fluctuate a bit before it steadies out, right? So let's say we're in a male dominated scene, and then we're kind of encouraging more influx of females. It might be that it overshoots, right? Let's say with your lab, there's more females come, but it gets to a point where it balances out. And I think because those who are applying see, there's a female PI, they feel inspired by that, and they're like, I would want to be. Because with previous conversations I've had, I talk about how when I first moved into the Gleason, before we moved into this building, that I was the only black scientist, so I didn't feel me personally didn't feel represented, because it's important that if I was aspiring to be a PI, for example, if I was to see a black PI, not even just a black female PI, that in itself is an encouragement to, push me, to give me the drive to show that actually I have a role model. I can chat with this person, see what their experiences have been like. And again, that's kind of why I'm doing this, to show experiences of different people. So what do you think, in regards to Cambridge, because you talk about, there can be discrimination, but what are your thoughts on when there's quotas to meet? Because I have a lot of discussion with several lab mates where they're in the day and age, because companies want to look like they're representative, they might have one or two positions that are set just for a minority. What are your thoughts on that? Because on one hand, it's good because you're encouraging those people to fill this position, but then you could then be taking away people who are deserving of those positions that haven't just been set out for another group. I don't know if that makes sense.
So
I see
what you mean.
I think
I think it's a good tool to get change happen, but I think, as you said, it's a double-edged sword, because you can feel like you're discriminating against other people, or that you yourself, if you take that position, you may feel like you don't fully deserve it, you're just there because of that. So to the latter, I think people should take advantage of the opportunity, and I guess maybe one thing I would advise anyone is not to feel that way. If you feel you want to do the job, just go for it. If something, and make the full out of the opportunity, and no matter why you're there, you are there, and so you can make a difference. And then, but if you feel it's not right, then don't take it. This is how I feel about this. And sometimes it's really difficult to know. And, sometimes you're in this position where you wonder, am I here because I'm a woman, or am I here because they really wanted my expertise? And in the end, I think, even though at the beginning it's harder, I think you should just ask yourself, is this what I want to do anyway? And then why you're there, I think it's secondary, because it gives you the chance to contribute. if you think you can't contribute anyway, just don't do it. But I know sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes we will do it and realize, well, I didn't gain anything from this. So, but it's hard to make the right decisions. But I guess in some sense it's good because it's a tool, but it has to be used with judgment, because you don't want to feel that other people felt like they were excluded because there was a need to do this. I think it is very difficult from a point of view of policy and organizations to get that balance right. But as you said before, I think at some point it's about, if it helps make a change, then it will help, and at some point we won't need quotas anymore because it will just be what it is.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's true that we always tend to feel, I guess it's part of human nature to, for any reason, we think we look different from the crowd, that we feel, underrepresented. And I guess that's part of why diversity is good from the start. And I was always lucky to be in an extremely diverse environment. I grew up in many different countries, and my father was also a scientist. We always had a very diverse environment of people coming from all sorts of places. And even though, not necessarily gender talking, but diversity, ethnic diversity, I tend to not feel much, if the environment's very diverse, I really like that, and I don't start thinking, oh, I'm the only woman Italian here. Also because there's so much variety, right? So much diversity. So I think what we should strive for is to get it as diverse as possible, and not necessarily trying to fit absolutely everyone, because otherwise the quotas would be too complicated. But it's just, if you feel that way, you also feel less singled out, because there's always so much diversity around you.
Great. That was a really great answer, actually, and give me a different insight on how to approach that.
I guess, for example, I felt always probably the most discriminated when I was in a little village in France, and I was a teenager, and I was the only Italian there, and I was always singled out as the Italian in the classroom, right? And this is, well, the other people were mostly French. Yeah. And then it disappeared, and at the time I thought, well, that's not nice, especially when a teenager. It's hard to cope with that, right? But growing and, also seeing other places, then you feel like if you immerse from it from the start, then you move to a different place where you're a minority in a different way, but you don't necessarily look at it that way, if you see what I mean. There's many ways of being a minority somehow, so.
Great. And there's one question I want to ask in regards to managing like a work-life balance, right? So as a PI, you have a lot on your plate, a lot of responsibilities. You have people in your lab that you're managing, but then you also have like your personal life. How do you balance that? Like, what is the tip?
I hope I do balance it. I try to.
Do you balance that?
I try to. I think I do. I've always tried to, and I think I've always done my best to balance it. Obviously, there's been moments in my life where I work really, really hard. I still do work really, really hard. I think there's no hours in science that you can really count. I think that's something that can be a blessing, because it means you can be as flexible as you want. So that's not always easy, because you're the one setting your own goals, and you're the one setting your own hours, and you need to put that balance. So that's not always easy, but you can do it if you want to. And whether I succeed or not, I don't know, but I guess at least one of my tricks is always, put time aside for non-science. And I think it's always really helpful, because then when you get back to it, you're more focused. And I would say going away for a bit, no matter whether it's 1 or 2 hours, in the evening, or whether it's a full weekend or an actual holiday, whatever it is, I think I always come back knowing I really love to do this, I'm happy to be here. So I think that's what drives you that. But if you always work or don't take these breaks, I find that then you don't enjoy your job as much. So I know from how I feel when I get to work whether I need more time off or not. This is where I'm trying to go. So I think this is my way of my body telling me you need some time off. So obviously, I guess everybody has different requirements in terms of how much time outside they need, and that depends on people, it depends on the family, it depends on who they need to care for, if it's themselves, the young family, or the elderly, or a combination of all those. So I think it's hard, but it is important to have something else. It puts things into perspective.
Yeah. What advice would you give any aspiring scientist, like, you know, taking into consideration your many years in science so far? What would be some of your top tips, or just advice in general?
Don't be discouraged. This is the first part. Something will go wrong in the lab.
Yes.
Or I think what is really hard, and that's, I think it's still hard for me, is actually be, you know, I don't have tenure, so obviously there's never security, so I think it's hard not to know what's going to come next, and the transition periods are always stressful. But I think we should approach this with the idea that you love what you do, and you know, you're going to get the best opportunities to be able to do what you love to do. Now, sometimes they will go well, sometimes they won't, and I think that's part of realizing that it's not the end of the world, something else will come along, and that's not easy. I think that's part of, it's true everywhere in life, but for scientists it's true every day, because, you know, experiments fail, opportunities fail, there's a lot of competition, and there is a lot of competition, that's true, but if you are passionate and you do your job well, I think at some point you may decide you want to go into something else, but you'll learn skills that are really important, and I think that's true of any start in science. You can do many things in many different other fields, and I would say go for what you want to do. It opens lots of opportunities, not only in academia.
So what do you find are struggles in your position as a PI?
No, I think what's really hard as a PI is that you know, I make my choice to handle the insecurity, but I'm also responsible for dragging the insecurity onto my people, because I only get grants that are this long, and you know, it's...
Yeah.
But, you know, I try to give them always the longest grant possible. I try to have plan B and plan C for them, and you try to factor all this. But it's not necessarily easy to do, and it's really a structural problem within academia at all levels, right? And even if you want to, you know, I can only strive to give them the more security I can, but there's only a limited number of things I can do. And that's true at all levels, you know. At the level head of the department, it's still the same, because there are so many different things. So I would say that potentially this is something that as a PhD you don't realize, or earlier in science you don't really see how, I mean, you see that there are grants and so on, but you would think that as you progress you may have a chance to change that, and you can in some extent, because I am the one who hires people, and I think that's sort of really rewarding actually, to be able to form a team and so on, but then you also feel like you'd like to give them the best, but because of limitations and funding, it's not always possible, and that's very frustrating. It's really important and you don't see it, and I guess for that my postdoc supervisor was really good, because he always involved us in all his decisions and so on, and he was very open about how he had to make decisions, and he was also very, you know, wanted to keep everyone for as long as they needed. And
so what's been your experience as a woman in science, as well as, you know, being a mom or not being a mom? How have your colleagues treated you, or how has science in general treated you when you were not a mother versus when you were a mother? What's been your experience with that?
So I've had a child quite late, so I had my child when I was already a PI, and I had to abandon the bench, so I think that made things easier for me. So I have more experience in science as a non-mom than as a mom, so that may change in a few years' time, but I certainly have felt like that there is judgment on either side, good or bad, in both sides. It depends on who it comes from, and I think that's always something that I think is really associated with being a woman in science. People cannot help, you know, it always comes as you're a woman in science, so you're either a mum or you're not a mum, but it's a big contribution to potentially discrimination either way. So I don't have a solution to that, but I know that some people have openly told me when I was not a mum that as a non-mum I should be able to dedicate more time to science than other people, which I find that absolutely ridiculous, because it's a personal choice, your work-life balance. And equally, unfortunately, it still happens that when people know that you're a mum and a scientist, then they think that, you know, you're more interested about talking about your daughter than about your science, and that's not necessarily true either. So I think that's definitely something that I try to keep separate. So when I'm at work, I'm a scientist, and it doesn't matter who I am. And, you know, when I'm at home, I try to be the best mum. But obviously it's true that there are changes that happen when you become a mum, and you have to adjust your time to it. But it's not undoable at all, and it's just about good planning, I would say. And I think we need to give everybody the support they need wherever they're at, whether they're a mum or they're not a mum, or they are caring for their parents or their grandparents, or someone they really love and that needs caring. I think it's the same thing everywhere. So
yeah, that is, it's, I think it's one of those things you hear about, but to hear it directly from someone like you experiencing that, it just makes you think like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? Because it's your personal life decision. Like, okay, when I want to have a child or all that kind of stuff, I should not be judged, or you don't have the right to make a comment on how I've chosen to live my life. So it's interesting how you say about, you know, when you are not a mom, that people were expecting that you should have put a lot more hours into or done a bit more. Like
it's obvious that, you know, when you have a child, you have less time, or at least you want to spend time with them. It's normal. You need to spend time with them. They need your care, or there's lots of things. So certainly the way you work changes, and I personally know that as a postdoc it would have been a lot harder than as a PI. And as a PI I'm much more flexible, so if I need to take care of her at certain times, I can work whenever I want. If you have an experiment, it's not that easy. So I think it's a really complex problem, and it's not straightforward. So in any case, we're all working hard and we're all giving our best, and I think, you know, the life changes in its periods, and so you sometimes your working pattern throughout your scientific career, no matter where it takes you, will change no matter what. So because you change, your surroundings change, what is required of your work changes. So, and it's part of integrating that into this, and it's not always easy. But it's true that there still is a lot of prejudice either way, unfortunately. So, but I think things are changing, and you see more and more women bringing their children to conferences and having more childcare options. I think is such an important part that's not necessarily been addressed, but it's about giving these opportunities, and then every woman needs to make the right choices that fit her in either direction. Having kids, not having kids, taking the childcare, not taking the childcare, taking them to the conference or not. I think it really depends on so many things. You can't give advice, but as with anything, I think the more possibilities you offer people, the better it will be.
But yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really insightful having this conversation. And how am I going to end this video? Hold on, let me try that again. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really insightful seeing, you know, your view and your experience as a female scientist, as well as your current position as a PI. And yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you guys have found this insightful as well, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Bye.